is it taught in the country. Fortunately, we have been a little more focused and we have better control on that. I forgot to say we under VTU, which is a university. Everything is dictated by them. The syllabus, modules, how many exams, how many tests, when the exams are conducted. We took a few years to figure out how to work around it. I think now we are in a place we have cracked the syllabus and work around it. So we make this sort of, we have 18 scheme, 21 scheme, how history is taught, theory is taught. And we have come with a comprehensive framework. What you see at the top is what the university says, what to be taught, and what is at the bottom is what are the focuses we are going to do at every year, is drawing and focusing, model making, diagramming, how to read a text. I think that's borrowed from C. When you showed us your framework, and we sort of end with a little paper at the 6th semester. And this is done by Krishna, one of our faculty who comes from a theory background, a lot of us teach. So this is a very strong sort of framework we have. We are in the process of making a publication out of this, so that all our experiments are sort of recorded in that as a pedagogical thing. So like semester 3 will focus on the architect and the patron. So these sub-themes are very interesting for us, even though the syllabus says it's institutions or something, we figured out to work around that. This is one place where we have started doing domains in which we focus, because the computers are taught in a way, working drawing are taught in a way as per university, but we are trying to mend it. So we start drawing a house in computer and we take the house and make the working drawing for that in the 3rd year. And this house we pick up from our daily and draw from something like that. So we are experimenting few ideas like that. As I'm short of time, I'll sort of go through this slide. Thesis has been a very interesting place for us. All our learning curve should end with this. So this is where we are at now. So we are saying to a thesis student that you can enter your thesis from these 5 points. It could be either geographical, it could be either social concern, or it could be a tectonic concern, or it's a theoretical research or a programmatic typology. I think we cover these sort of journeys in our studios, and the students get to pick one of these trajectories, and irrespective of whatever trajectory they pick, you should go through the other lenses also. Because why we did this, because we sort of, many theses were very social concerns, but we thought we should also broaden it up and work it out. This is where we are working on how to work with the thesis as of now. I think I'll end with one sort of very quick student project, just to show. So this is Bhamini, she's from the 19 batch. Her question was, what is the defining the agents of the architect? That was the question. Interestingly, she took the case study of dementia patients. So it was interesting, the question didn't start from dementia, it started what is the agency of the architect. So if you're in a room, and if the door is not of the right size or proportion, it's very difficult for a dementia patient because they can walk out of the room if it is not designed in the right way. Means architecture can't, that's an inquiry that architecture can't go wrong in any condition. So I think this was a very interesting thesis for us because it started with a very strong theoretical premise, and here it says what is the agency of the architect and what are the elements of built environment, what are the implications and what are the psychological impact. And so she sort of made sort of a framework for herself, spatial awareness, spatial orientation, ordering and conditions through which you can look at architecture and what that can become specific for a facility like that. And she placed it in an existing community in Bangalore, so that the idea of that it's not a gated care, but they are part of a community, and these are early stage dementia patients who are self-aware and they can go and meet with the neighbors, and how community engagement can happen through the institution. And this is the project, and it's sort of a modular system. So it was an interesting project. She had to come out to in and in to out in terms of material strategies, sizes, surfaces and everything. I think not time to explain this, but that's the sort of architecture. And we also want to ground it in the sort of construction, materiality, landscape and everything. So it's also not just a theoretical framework, it's grounded in experience. And these are some of the products. And sort of the closing the articulation with where she started with what are the conditions and how they were sort of achieved in the project. I think sort of a mixed bag of where we are, with a small slice of what we do.
It's interesting to see the focus on waste, climate, sustainability. And several things. I invite the presentation next.
Good morning, everybody. So I just quickly run through. So this is something that I always have on my table, and it drives mostly what we think about what it should be the future of learning or the architecture of this course. With so much of freedom, I think all of us will agree that there is a possibility to teach whatever you want, but how do you teach it, and in what name is it? So this is what I always go from. And I think an institution that's offering an architectural discourse should be all three, a guild, an atelier, or a think tank at most of the times, and that is when it becomes meaningful. So these were some of the milestones when we started. So CARE was started in 2010, and I share a lot of similarities with Kiran. We come from, we are affiliated to Anna University, which has a very strict structure as far as the curriculum is concerned. And then we were a group of practitioners who were involved in the beginning of the starting of the school. And so we just, initially there was really no direction in which we were aiming to go. So we started with 4 students. Our first batch had just 4 students. So next, the turning point was when we had an opportunity to do a summer school with the Westfield Academy of Arts and Design under Professor Sharon Rothberg. So this one, I will show you this one. So this is what we produced. This is at the KVK Government, the government institution, and the classrooms. And a classroom for farmers. This course is called as the Spontaneous Architecture course, and he runs it as a summer course every year. So this September too, we are collaborating with him. This was sort of a turning point. We ourselves and students from CARE and Israel, both of them worked on this project together. The other one is the Cocoon, which is with the Aarhus School of Architecture in Denmark. I'll show you the image. So this is it. This was another eye-opener of the material that was available in abundance in the region, but we had not even thought about it this way. And then the next one is very familiar. This one is a summer-winter workshop. It was under Professor Sankal in CARE. So these were the things that it got us thinking, and it had established a culture of learning by doing in schools, or making, a culture of making was already established, because within a short span of 6 months, we had 6 months to a year, we had undergone all of these workshops. So the constant ponderings in school is that do you definitely need a specific pedagogy or a specific philosophy to run a school, or is it an aggregation of different directions? Is that a real methodology? Is the school experimenting, or is a platform for experimentation? We think we are pretty open-ended that way in the school. And then in 2018, again, we had the, under mentorship of Professor Chara, we had the opportunity to do the manifesto. And these are some of the things that were part of the manifesto. So I'll just do what we hold important because we are running short of time. And in that, I will take the second point, which says we believe we must immerse ourselves in actively creating newer forms of knowledge. That's one of the key notes of this conference as well. So how we do that, with various avenues that we do that, I'll quickly run through. So there is this a collaboration between experimental practices and the academy. It's a little slow. Should I go to the next one? Oh, this is the one. So, yeah. So experimental practices are open to people who experiment. So this workshop was by Sendil Kumar Das, one of the awardees of the World Architecture Festival in 22. So this is where his research on the timbrel started. So with the first workshop in 2015. So you can see this is the one. So I have the timeline there. From 2015 till 22 when he was awarded, we've had different instances, and every summer we used to have a workshop. The structure is still there in school. Yeah. So this is the project which he was awarded for, the roots of which were sown in school. So that sort of cemented our idea that the school definitely is a platform where experiments are conducted and people are open to come and conduct with them. And this is the next project in the same line, which is a design film. So as I told you, we always love to engage in doing on-site on a real scale. So this is it. This is another structural experiment that happened on campus, where analogous methods and computational were used together. So these are newer fields that we engage in. That's the campus. So this is in Nubra Valley. Our students were involved in building this market under this cultural thing as a part of another travel workshop that happened. So this is another in school which was a prototyping based on generative technology. So this is how we try to keep ourselves relevant and updated. The GIS maps to trace the waste of electricity. This is the photogrammetry, another technique for documentation. This is again the Nubra Valley. Then hybrid drawings, as Kiran was also showing. This is like an RSP, but we call it the rural study. I'd like to elaborate here a little bit about Trichy. Trichy is a small town and pretty religious and cultural with a lot of historic monuments, but not home to contemporary architecture, as you may call it. So the students also come from very humble, they come from humble backgrounds and they're not exposed to a lot of architecture as maybe people who come from the metros. So we have that and we have to work around that one. So how much of the local and how much of the global trends do we do? That's always been a question and an equation that we try to crack. So one of the ways, so these are ways of how we deal with that. Our situational disadvantage, if I may call it, it has advantages as well because it's an emerging, developing city and there's a lot of avenues where you can engage with the city itself and with the stakeholders and the government itself in a more meaningful way. It has its own, so we engage with a lot of, so we try to create a lot of voices in the school, and this multiplicity of voices is what keeps us going. There is no one particular position that the school takes. So we encourage the students also because we need to expose them to as much as possible in those 5 years. So we work with practices. So these are some of the practices that are offered. So it's there, KSM. Then we have allied fields. Then we have our mentors. So this is the kind of setup that we engage when it's one-to-one, it's very personal. So this is what I'm saying, that we emphasize on flexibility and adaptability and avoid very rigid structures and are open. So we believe that the tension between all of this, as you see, the rural-urban, ecology, development, all these dichotomies, when the student comes out, he needs to have a critical thinking to face all of this. So how do you develop these kind of nuanced capacities in a student is what we look at. These are some of the questions in the studios that we work with. So we primarily work with our immediate context. We primarily work with our immediate context because that is where the experience lies. And when you come from a space of experience, I think that is when you can better engage with the project that you're doing. So this is one of the projects, so we just see how we question. This is not a regular brief and we do not follow a linear structure. Which is called traversing the city. So here the studio works around how the house, which is the smallest unit, can contribute to the city and vice versa. And work on horizontal densities because we still have the liberty to go horizontal. Then we've been doing a lot of experiments on these on the foundation course as well, so I'll just quickly run through because we're short of time. So there's a lot of imitation and bodily engagement with this. We believe this haptic, bodily and the senses is what needs to be cultivated. So capturing the textures, drawing making, abstractions. There are multiple points where we start from. And narrative, various narratives which the student engages with. So we just, for their flyer, we let them imagine, visualize. The main intention is to resensitize them to, because when they come out of the schools, they are really numbed by all this rote learning. So the idea is to resensitize them and develop their haptic skills and help them relearn the use of the body. I just give you that. So this is one semester, this is the second one. It slightly moves into spatial exploration. And this is a thesis. So I just want to see how the growth is. I just want to show you. So this is the kind of thesis work that the student engages in. And this is what is the impact that we wish to have. Thank you.
Thanks, Rina Saptarishi, to make this presentation.
Hello. I do not have a presentation. I have structure I will discuss. And before that, I will explain what we do in IIT Roorkee and what is our take on the structure of syllabus and curriculum. So I'll just briefly introduce myself, which you have already done. So I am right now in the Department of Architecture, assistant professor there, but also I am joint faculty of Department of Design. And in Department of Design has been part of the course structure for MDes, which is Master of Design, and then recently we also started BDes. So I'll give you a comparative analysis of a comparative overview of how we do it in architecture and how we do it in design. So there is a structure in IIT, which is administrative system, which is part of which amalgamates other departments, which is mostly engineering departments. So there is a structure which comes from our VOG and then director and senate. And within that, so they give the basic framework of in which we have to, we have to create our syllabus. So if you look at this institute core program, core courses, so this is the structure which our institute gives. Within that, we have the flexibility to change based on every department. This process of revising syllabus generally happens in every 3 to 4 years. So recently we have launched our new syllabus. So our first year UG and first year masters are in new syllabus. So this process started in revision of syllabus process started in 2022. So we actually took 2 years to revise our syllabus and update our syllabus So we conducted, especially in the Department of Design, we conducted a series of workshops where we invited people from academia and industry and then revise the syllabus. So in that way we are flexible, and every department has their own take to change this structure and which component will be there in which segment. And also recently when we started BDS program, because it's a new department, we took the template of architecture and tried to implement that in design, but it didn't work. We thought that it was not the right mode, because we take architects, architecture PG students from GE, their rank comes from GE Advanced, not even GE Mains. And then we take UG of design from UC, which is a completely different typology of exams. So there, the student index itself is very, very different. So that format didn't work. So within one semester we changed the syllabus. So the next semester when they go, they're in the new syllabus. So we are that flexible. I don't take it as a failure experience, but it is a flexibility which IIT gives. So few of the characteristics, as I said, that we are mainly a tech-heavy institute, and our strength is, especially in architecture, is that we can incorporate the existence of other departments, which is civil, material, some manufacturing, or which is subset of mechanical engineers, and then humanities, management. We have our art science department. All these departments are there. So we take, we exploit that opportunity. And then we have different levels of lab system. We have the central lab where the equipments are very costly, or where different departments share that lab facility, so which is the institute instrumentation center. And then we have the departmental lab, and then within the departmental lab we have some different hierarchy of labs. One comes, few of the labs are through project. Few of the central labs, like we have a climatology lab where there are heliodons, and which mimics the sun part, and they can place the model and check the sciography. And then we have the climate chamber where we can change the humidity, temperature, and test the result. And then every faculty has their personalized lab or equipment. Like for example, I can talk about myself. I do work with eye tracker, which is which collects the visual fixation data in urban fabric. So in architecture department, I do work with the fixation in building level or in the in urban level. So we can try to understand what is the wayfinding behavior, or what is the spatial cognition happening in this through this tool. And in design, I do work with eye tracker to understand in VR or in other paradigms of a digital system what people are looking at, and how their behavior of visual cognition and their behavior is correlated. So these are the lab systems we have. And yeah, coming to the structure of the changes of UG, PG, and PhD. UG is definitely is more structured, and we have the different courses there, and the component of research is less. And then PG, the component of research becomes more, and PhD is completely, the coursework is very minor and completely your intake for the research. But within that, as IIT Roorkee, we do focus on research, also from the PG level. And our student intake is like that, so they are more analytical, and then rather they're venturing into spatial or aesthetic perception will be different. So in UG, we also have two process. One is they can do a minor specialization, where again they can take the specialization. VR student can also have a minor specialization in mathematics, can also have a minor specialization in any other department, and many of them can also do a minor specialization in one of the baskets of architecture, for example, interior, urban design, or planning also. right? But it is open to not only in our department, it can go across other departments also. And recently in our recent syllabus, we have created two thesis projects. The first thesis project, which is in 5th year, just after they come from the training program, is the design thesis, which is focused on design. And the second semester, which is the final semester, they can either go for a project in any company, or they have to do a research-based thesis. So that is what they do. And masters also, Master of Architecture, as well as in this, we have different baskets. So we do not give so it's our general masters in architecture. We don't have landscape housing and this segregation. We have MArch and this MURP, Masters in Urban and Regional Planning. In MArch, we have different sub-baskets which we have created. So can be interior, can be one sub-basket. Then urban design related domain can be one sub-basket. Then generative design parametric architecture, that can be another sub-basket, so on and so forth. Yeah. So this is the overall structure of IIT Roorkee, and yet every department, and as I was saying, that they have their own flexibility to change. And our recent ethos, which we the center of IIT Roorkee, there was people from faculty from different departments. They came together to create the structure. So what we try to inculcate, especially in UG syllabus, is across. So this I'm talking about across different department. That inter-department collaboration. So there will be we increased the number of subjects where they have to take subjects from other departments. So there are electives which mandatorily has to be from another department. So that is incorporated, and also in architecture we do follow that. And then there is a course, especially in first year, we have introduced, which is tinkering and mentoring. So that is not in classroom teaching. So they have to come up with a product and of their own domain, and then the students of different other department comes together. So they are not everybody is from the same department. They'll come together and work under a faculty from any other department, can be also the faculty mentor, and then they will come up with a product, and where there can be a digital interfaces also, or can be completely tangible products. So that they do, so that they come in the mode of engineering and also hands-on product making. And the another thing which we focus on is the startup ecosystem. If they are following, they want to make their product in viable in market, so that is also inculcated. And yeah, so these are the things which is the new structure of the overall IT structure to facilitate, and which works for our department of architecture also, because we had a long deliberation that because this is earlier this was many faculty faced raised the issue that there is a problem that we take students who come from GE and then we try to make them a completely different type of architect, but then we are trying to make them a different type of architect. The engineers component of architecture is more, and which works better in our cases. We are not competing with other school of thought of architecture. We are making our own different type of logic of architecture, and then they are doing well in our cases. And yes, so they do go into the research, as you might know that we are IIT Roorkee is in IIR rank 1 for the last 4 years. So we do score quite less in the perception of architecture. That's less, but our research component is really very high. So that makes us in IIR rank 1, which is working in our ecosystem, and that works for the pedagogy of our structure.
Thanks, Antaresh. I invite Dani to present C's articulation of its pedagogy.
So yeah, thanks and welcome first of all, everyone. I think what we are also seeing is this a cross section of India over here. You know, there's a diversity of thought, and I think that's really one of the reasons why we're here. Like Rohit mentioned, the last 2 days we've been having a closed door meeting with many of these schools. Also, in some ways, deliberating on what it means to think of education in the future, in the next few years. Some of us are 10 years old, around 10 years old, and some are a little bit bigger. And there's also, we have a representation of older schools. There's SEPT, SPA, unfortunately there's someone from SPA who was supposed to come and she couldn't make it. But the SEPT, SPA, the IITs, the school in Shipur, which is also an Indian Institute of Technology. We have us who are 10 years old, CARE, WCFA, Varyar and Avni. And then we have Navrachna and we have Nitte, which are bigger universities. So it's a very interesting range of schools, but also schools of thought. You know? And the idea is to really kind of look at us not working as silos, but really kind of looking at what it is that we are all doing and how we can grow together in the future. So with that, I think what I'll do is very briefly go through some of the structures that we've been involving ourselves at C, located within the structure of Mumbai University. I'd also encourage you to see this presentation because it's also short, it's a 10-minute thing, but in conjunction with two other things. One, we have an exhibition going on downstairs with that, and we have a new publication that we just launched yesterday called Soft Forms, which in some ways also speaks about the positions that C has taken in the last 10 years. So the first one is really kind of trying to build for ourselves a systematic idea of locating ourselves within humanities, history, theory courses. And this also comes from understanding where we are located in, where architectural education is coming from. On the one hand, we were located within certain colonial ways of looking at history that were in some ways located in stylistic readings of how Indian architecture had panned out. And there's a lot of baggage from that stylistic reading which is still there within our own curriculums, but also our own practices. And then there's a post-independence, we had the urge of looking at an Indian identity. And in many ways we also landed up really kind of then in this quest for an Indian identity, landed up making a pan-Indian identity. And perhaps that also kind of ruled out many other ways in which we start looking at specificities of the region. And then of course we had shifts of how things worked in the market and sort of operated from there. So in some ways what we did is this is actually 10 semesters, across 10 semesters. The first, we open up questions of really kind of world making. You know, so again, like some of us were saying here, people who come from 10+2 education with rote learning really have never asked a question. So the first thing you do is you ask a question. You write a 200-word question when you come into the first year, and that's when you start shaking up a lot of the baggage of what we came in from. And also kind of asking both questions of the self and where one is located, but also questions of the other and the world. And then you open up to looking at art images and images that sort of have produced the world, and art becomes an important mode then for us to open up those questions. The second semester we do a history of building technology, where again you start locating yourself into where is that technology located itself. Spatial history of the world, starting to understand where type is located, where do some of the types that we kind of work with come from. Spatial theory is an important thing again, where you start looking at what are the coordinates of space making, and again where you locate yourself. South Asian architecture is a very important focus for us, also because we realized when we started looking at design studios, we saw that all our references came because of easy media, art daily and other things came from various contexts. So we're very carefully looking at where, how we're located within South Asia, and particularly not looking at South Asia again only as an area-based study, but asking conceptual questions of space. So what is the space making, and what is the life it produces? It becomes important for us. So the question would be in the future, I mean these are still fledgling, but the idea is, can we produce a theory of space from South Asia rather than only of South Asia, right? And then sixth semester opens up to questions of urbanization, questions of emerging urbanism, and this is where again this group becomes really interesting, because we are located within very interesting geographies which are emerging in very interesting ways. So how do we bring that in? Seventh semester we look at ethics and professional practice. Again, one of the contentions is that professional practice really was about how do you train the architect, to actually protect the client against bad contractors and others. That's really what was instituted in a professional practice. But in moving that into kind of ethics of space and bringing in the idea of how do we look at world making, the constitution and other things are introduced in this cluster, in this module. And then we have research methods, which is an important course, which is a where you train students in research methods. They're trained to ask a spatial question in the 9th semester, where they produce original text, original drawings, and some of those you will see downstairs in the exhibition. So there's a library that we've set up downstairs where you can go to. The 10th semester we look at what are some of the trajectories of contemporary architecture, where they're located, and also then the question is then where would students locate themselves and how do they spring from there. So that's sort of the structure. And then again the structure of the design studios, and we call these space and form oriented courses. The first semester is again looking at various coordinates of form. Form located in forces, form located in how we see space around us, and form located in experience. The second semester opens up students to material experiments. So again, how does material behave, how do forces behave, and you'll see again some of them in the exhibition, but there's also it's not a pavilion, no, people don't like to call it a pavilion, it's a long table that is a feast table that is built. That is a 1:1 experiment where you'll see the experiments then kind of also going to larger volume scales. The third semester looks at environment and architecture and how one locates themselves within that, and again moving into several ways of looking at passive architecture, but also the life cycles of materials, where do they come from, where do they go. The third semester looks at architectural syntax, so how do you kind of look at the making of form through a certain grammar of space making. Fourth semester again it looks at building systems, so all kinds of systems that produce space. If you see this, every semester there are 2 studios, and so that is again one of the structures that you have. These are modules, so each of these modules will be 7 weeks, 6 weeks or 7 weeks. Okay? The second one in the 4th semester looks at studies in building types in historical neighborhoods. So again, looking at where some of these types have come from, how they've evolved culturally, climatically, socially, but also noting the transformations that are happening within that. So not really kind of also saying that what came up, because these are transforming because of economic and social conditions. So to locate some of those changes and then suggest where do we spring from there. How do you rework the type or take the next step that the type has come from. The 5th semester looks at an ontological, genealogical, and typological question of space. So again, instead of designing a school or a library, we say how do you design, what is a school, what is a home, what is an archive. So you kind of look at critical texts that open up some of the questions of the institution, but also look at the genealogy of where some of this, where this genealogy of where this type has come from, what is the society that this type has produced, and then start looking at what the shifts could be for a contemporary context. So again, you'll see some of those. There's a school which is rethinking what the classroom would be as a space which is a kind of series of rooms in a garden, rethinking completely what an ontological idea of what a school is. Community and institutions, again, locating themselves within community fabrics in the city, trying to understand what are some of the forces that produce spaces in the community, and then reworking a type from there. The sixth semester is building making. So again, this is leading towards working drawings, but then working drawings really are also kind of looking at what are some of the processes, what are the steps that you undergo in the making of the assembly of buildings, and you design a project and then do a working drawing. So this is really like an entire working drawing semester. The seventh semester, the design of mass inhabitation, and mass inhabitation has gone through again series of very specific ideas of what mass inhabitation is. So for example, we have students who have worked with cooperative housing societies in the city that are transforming, and then starting to look at what is it that the developers are providing, but what are some of the social structures within this place, and where do they, what is it that is really required in the future of housing. But also then going through all kinds of things from the feasibility studies, trying to understand the economics of the land, and then saying how is it that one can transform this, right? Then the ninth semester, and I just to kind of say, because I might not be able to go through all the slides which are demonstrating some of this, but I thought it was important to talk about the structure. Another thing that we saw in mass housing was that a lot, particularly also located in Mumbai, a lot of housing was really about then speculative housing. You were making housing for developers which was inaccessible to a lot of people, and we found that in one of the research projects that really the census of India shows that people are not homeless, people have houses. And the demand supply of housing shows that at the current rate of what existing policies are, it will take 100 years to fulfill that gap. So then instead of that, can you think of mass housing as repair and retrofit? So that is a big area that we started getting into. Repair and retrofit became a way of engaging architects in the improvement of houses rather than the making of houses. And just the last two, I'm running out of time, right? Okay, I have 3 minutes. So the ninth semester, again, like I said, it's about building spatial arguments. So we took the opportunity where Mumbai University had changed into 9th semester being a written thesis, and 10th semester was a design thesis. But generally what used to happen was that 9th semester became about building the program, making a project report. So instead we shifted that completely to really training students to ask a spatial question. What are some of the coordinates of where we are located? What are some of the coordinates of space that is being produced? So for example, somebody would look at old age, and what are some of the specialities that are producing old age, and then how does one actually look at the future of environments for old age, but then also going through series of very careful spatial ethnographic studies of how people experience and behave in these spaces. Again, you'll see that in the exhibition downstairs. And the 10th semester is a demonstration of some of the ideas that you draw from the 9th semester. The 9th semester, mind you, can also be a standalone work, which other people can then take up later, right? So it's not something that is only subservient to the 10th semester, but it can spring board into other research work. But 10th semester then, as a design inquiry, draws from some of the findings from the 9th semester and then finds a site, finds a certain kind of location to then test out some of these inquiries. So I have 1 minute. Okay, so I really don't have time to go through all of that, but I'll just kind of very quickly in 1 minute run through the slides. So form-oriented, like I've already told you, form-oriented studies that range from the experience of bodily experience in space and draw it full scale using your entire bodies to sense your environments and draw in experiential ways to starting to look at how form is produced through forces and material logics. So you'll see some of that here, and then we also use theatre as method in the first year where students kind of come together and also perform. So they're making architecture which becomes a setting for bodies to move, but also wearing architecture and performing in ways that where you start generating a community of people instead of individual architects in the first year. So yeah, some of these are the community studies. So this table you will see in the next plot. So some of you who have not can go and see that. Yeah. These are the material studies, and so again system-oriented thinking. So how do you work with questions of water and sanitation and others, and how do you produce form from there? Questions of type. And where how type is transforming, how socioeconomic changes are happening, but how can you rework or tweak the existing type from where one is located. The genealogical studies. So, for example, on the right-hand side, this is the idea of what is a school. The school became these kind of series of episodes through which one experienced the breaking of the classroom. Questions of mass and habitation, working with cooperative housing societies, working with emerging contexts and what are some of the logics of space there. Focused on spatial, ecological, and urbanistic thinking. These are entire trajectories of the Khoisan River, which students are working with, like transects in. The repair and retrofitting module, which is again working with the community and clusters of people, but really kind of suggesting real changes. And this is actually also coming into this has come back into the school as a research project that where we're engaged with researchers and others who are located in the school. So the studio doesn't remain as a silo, again comes back into research and testing and pilot projects within the city. So I will end there since my 1 minute is up. Thank you.
Thanks, Rupali. Thanks for that presentation. We started 30 minutes late, so I'm going to kind of keep my conversation very short now, open up the conversation with the audience so that we can have comments, questions, and other things. I want to make one brief comment before I open it up. What I noticed from each of the presentations, and I'll start with IIT's pedagogical model is situated in a laboratory model, and it's kind of the Indian Institute of Technology. It also draws from several other such models in Europe, particularly, say, for instance, the EPFL in Lausanne or the Swedish institutes where architecture is situated within the technological streams, and it's taught in a laboratory mode. And in India, the context for it was questions around the nation and national development. And one of the things that would be useful to articulate is where do we see that going at the present contemporary moment in time. Care's work opened out in a very interesting way from the laboratory model, the idea of the workshop. So it's the workshop which is not situated in a laboratory, in an institution, but the laboratory can be the campus, but it also can move outside. And that seems to be the model to kind of locate some of the more exploratory and innovative orientations of the work that seems to be taking place in the school. I'm just picking up one aspect and not kind of talking about the whole school's work, but I caught on this. When I see WCFA's work and see his work, so let me place WCFA's work as I read it. The question on place, so locating questions about place as a cultural location opens out to 3 or 4 orientations. The focus on related study programs, the focus on settlement studies and interventions into some of those contexts. But there is also, in thinking about place, the first slide that you showed, a kind of an hierarchical organization of scale starting from the self and moving to larger. So scale in that sense is a series of hierarchies. And what I see from the way Rupali presented C's work, and more familiar with it than the others, Rupali's pointing out of South Asia as a cultural location becomes a context within which many of these experiments that she spoke about, the first 2 slides that she showed, and the module system, which allows C to locate experiments not only within the classroom, but also to locate them outside. Maybe we'll see some of them as well. But there is also an emphasis here to not see scale hierarchical in its organization. If you see all of those, the modules, the self and the world, or all the other modules, there's no hierarchical organization in scale. In fact, we don't see scale as contributing to complexity. The 7th semester mass housing work that we seem to be doing recently are actually very small interventions, but are very complex projects because they are very difficult contexts to kind of intervene in. So I see the laboratory model, the workshop model, the place-based or cultural location kind of model that seem to be opening up as 4 pedagogical experiments over here. So as I mentioned in the case of IIT, I mean, my question to you all, just one question to you all, where do you see these experiments going in the next 5 years or 10 years, and if there is something that you all want to talk about?
Our model, which we follow, it's slightly different. Maybe I can add a couple of more sentences to explain it a little bit better. When we talk about the model, I would define it as more tech-based perspective of looking at architecture, but it may not be only within the lab. It can also, our students go there, like recently we went there to Tobacco village of Andhra Pradesh, and a few of the works are happening in Jaipur and Jodhpur. So what is the pathway differences, and Jaipur versus Lucknow, what are the differences? But through which lenses we see is more maybe tech lenses than the social science lenses. So what we recorded is the eye tracking and where they are looking at and what is the fixation point. So then the methodology or the tools and techniques are different, but it's not like in architecture the living laboratory is outside. So that is also there. But the shift of tools, techniques, and the way we look at architecture is slightly different. As architecture is there's a T-shaped model. So the horizontal knowledge we give them, which is there prescribed as a top-down approach, where COA or other institute which has to make one student be give them the VR degree, what has to be there. But then there is a much larger elective basket we give from the across the other disciplines, so that every student who is going as a VR degree can stick to the traditional model of architecture as well if he or she takes the electives of the same department, but also has the flexibility to take gain knowledge from the other things. That was the major difference.
It's a good have a big plan for next 5-10 years, but what we noticed is because again the question of starting the school in Mysore has attracted students from North Karnataka, smaller towns of Tamil Nadu, some from Kerala, and because most of the studios are drawing their references from cities like studios in Pune and not the metros. Not a conscious decision, it's just we have not entered Bangalore too much to do a studio. What has happened is the students who come from smaller towns or Mysore-like towns, they have studied here and worked in that field. Now they have started practicing in that zone. Not everybody, if you go towards the metros. So I think somehow that energy we have drawn from the non-metros is going back. And some, like 3-4 students have started an office in Bangalore, some have started in Bangalore, in Mysore. So that it's taking and giving back to the 2-tier cities. I think there's a lot of scope for architecture in these areas, and I think that's the sort of route we are looking at. Or not route, that's the sort of field we are looking at.
Thanks. I was explicitly looking at that statement of looking at smaller cities, not the metros, as places for new kinds of architecture experimentation. The census of the last decade has shown us that the future of India is going to lie in these smaller places, in the smaller towns, and so on and so forth. So what are the architectural coordinates of that exploration?
I totally second what you're saying. So that is precisely what drives us in this school. These opportunities that we have in this school. I don't even like calling them tier 2 cities because they have a lot of potential. They are developing cities. Because tier 2 cities, the way people look at a tier 2 city is very different. But we have seen from experience that there is immense potential in developing newer forms of architecture. That is meaningful and very, very relevant to the times that we live in right now. So that is the plan for the next 5 years too. Now, right now, it looks like we don't have much of an emphasis on the humanities part of it. So that is where my focus is right now for next year, next couple of years. So that coupled with the making that we already do, I'm sure we will be engaging a lot more in this.
Thanks, Belinda. The discomfort that you mentioned, that I'm not comfortable with calling these places as tier 2 cities itself is a place to start thinking of conceptualization. We look forward to kind of,
You're written off in most of the cases.
Sorry?
You're written off as a tier 2 city, right?
Yeah, reorienting that conceptualization, reorienting that discomfort to kind of think of non-metro cities as something lesser than the metro, and to start conceptualizing from there is what, I mean, it's something that we are also kind of have engaged with, kind of thinking about in terms of our own inquiries. We share that opinion.
Yeah, I just, I mean, the way to answer probably that question is to also look at the next 2 sessions that will come in on new methods and on new institutionalization, because I don't think it's possible to think of a curriculum without understanding structural logics of an institution. So one of the things that we've done in the school is that a lot of this pedagogy also becomes practices of faculty members in the school. So we've identified around 5 research clusters around which some of this happens. So one is on emerging housing and emerging urbanization, within which now we started looking at repair and retrofit as a focused area to work with because of the findings of some of those clusters. South Asian architecture, like we mentioned, questions of visual culture and how do you look at drawing space, questions of material experimentation and what we call cooking architecture, which Tushar likes to call. So I think so these are some of the areas that we've been working with as faculty practitioners. And I think what we would like to do probably, and this is where students then also become companions in the journey on in a flat structure rather than a kind of what Paulo Freire would say, a banking model of education. So the next steps, and I feel like this is something that we have broadly been able to identify and build on. I think the next few years will be really kind of going deeper into the specificities of these practices and how this becomes a kind of practice-based pedagogy as well. So I think that's what the next 5 years probably is going to be.
Very interesting thoughts that have emerged. I want to open this conversation up to the audience, and so we'd like to take up comments, questions, and any other suggestions that you all might have. Yes, sure.
I have a question particularly to Kiran Kumar and Priyanka, because I have visited Hassan in the initial years, and I have been to care college also in the initial years. It's nice to see what you presented. Question, if you can answer, is it's a long question, so I have wrote it. The student when he joins after 12th standard is not knowing what architecture is all about, to begin with. How do you decide the intended future of training him across 5 years, making him an architect, which can vary from being practicing architect or a researcher? And if the answer is that we are trying for either, how do you balance this? And without dictating it as a school thinking.
How we build his capacities as an architect, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, as a researcher. Yes, there are, through the courses, that's what I was saying, we have a lot of people come in at different levels, if I may say so. Besides the tutor, they are exposed to a host of people who are mentors, guests, experts. So they have a choice to pick it up from them. That's what I believe in the school. We develop, as I was saying, multiple voices. So these kind of voices help them take position. So if you are able to take a position, you are able to do a research. Or else there is always this teaching of the craft of building making. So then through that they learn. They don't have to be, if that is what you mean, they don't have to be theoreticians or they don't have to be exposed. We have had students who have nil exposure, who have not traveled, but they become great students after who have great practices right now. So I think that's the responsibility of the school to individually tailor it to their needs.
I think it's also similar answer that there is multiple exposure within the school. Like some of us are conservation architects and somebody comes from theory background. So even now we have a pool of students to see what they've done. Also some have inclined towards writing or they've gone for matter, they've been able to help them curate. There's a mixed, right? And the other question also is like we're also saying whether they go into and work under practice or they do on their own. I think that on that end also we have students doing both. We have gone to Delhi and Bangalore to work, and some have gone back to their like Mysore and Bangalore and they've started their practice. A few have deviated even into other fields and some in writing. It's just the exposure they get through various programs over the 5 years and they get inclined to different things.
Thanks. I mean, just that response was very nicely articulated. That at this moment in time that there may be so many areas of practice that the school may only be able to provide an orientation and a capacity to be able to engage with them rather than thinking that it has to skill them in those things. That there are certain skills that are necessary in schools engage. But I mean, we were discussing in the workshops that we were in yesterday and day before yesterday. I mean, just the question about what is to be considered architectural practice. And there's such a diversity of practices today, and it is the diversity of practices that students need to be oriented to is something that emerged as a common theme of discussion. So, yeah.
Thanks to all of you, wonderful presentations. I'm familiar with many of the schools, and this is a question to you, Kiran. Your school in Mysore, and I was wondering, of course, there is this whole idea of a small town story. But I'm also wondering what, and I'm linking it with what we have in the next panel on institutional forms. I mean, you do have the former princely states being the benevolent patron for a new institution. And then there is this choice to make whether to have it in Bangalore or whether to have it in Mysore. Right? C is binary opposite in terms of its circumstances. It is in the hustle and bustle of a city. And I just wanted to know how much of that could have impacted what you have presented here. Have you been in Bangalore, for example, the 10 of you? So I'm just thinking, does this former princely state in its modern avatar of a city offers that kind of an asylum or a reclusive space away, and that's what these states did. A lot of these places of learning were away from the mainstream. And I'm just trying to see how much of that could have impacted what we do right now. What would have been the case if you were sitting in Bangalore?
No, but the answer, we are not even just associated with princely state. Our core trust is a royal family.
Yeah, I know that. But so that's that. I didn't say it.
Yeah.
The land comes from there, and maybe the capital expenditure. Yeah. But I'm trying to understand this reconfiguration and.
No, so interestingly, the association with this, they gave us the space, but they don't interfere in anything else. But because of that association, we are at the heart of city. And how the institution is built, for any of you who have not seen the campus, there are these two old buildings which are 150 years old, and over the 5 years, with Prashant and Manjula, some of you are familiar, have built this sort of steel fabric around it. That building is the metaphor of how we are thinking of ourselves, that there is that institution, old place, and how we have been able to build around it. I don't know the answer if we were in Bangalore, what we would have done, but it's not that we were in Bangalore. I think all the faculty, now the founding partners travel and go. It's interesting who chose to be like me and who chose to come and teach in Mysore is another group of faculty, who all have options to be in a metro. It's by choice we are in like Mysore. That also, like I studied in Mysore, I came back to Mysore, and a lot of faculty are in Mysore. All of us could be in Bangalore. I don't know what is the connecting tissue, but there is a slowness to it. There is definitely a slowness to it in what we aspire to or the way we are. I think that ties it together. There are a lot of challenges with that slowness. Like some students from Bangalore get restless after a week. Like, what do I do here now, right? Like, because you have 3 hours extra time in your day. So
Yeah, I mean, one could be slowness, but I'm also hinting at, does it provide a kind of a shield? You know, what happens is when you have a powerful patron and you are away from the mainstream, there is also a protected environment, which might be the right nourishing circumstances. I'm thinking in a very different fashion, but yeah, very interesting to think about. When you said that, you consciously said, I was just wondering why. There are all the history questions here.
yeah, like Prashant says that means if you are studying in Mysore, there are not much distractions. You just have to be in the school and you can focus on, and there is a certain sheet, not a sheet, I would say, there is a boundary within which we operate. This I'm not saying from what WC and what I studied in Mysore. It was much more. So even Bangalore was very innovative for us. So but that created a space to grow in your own way, even if it's a slow way.
Thanks, Pratush. Actually, I read your question in exactly the opposite way, in the sense that there is a embeddedness of historical context of this trustee which is affording support, but the new context of urbanization shows you that these are the places that are going to transform in significant ways. So urbanization is coming at you, and although you may find yourself as institutionally protected to carve out a certain form of practice, the form of urbanization is just going to take over and will have a bearing on the pedagogical exploration itself.
I know I don't want to say, but I think what is interesting in his question was, I think what was interesting in his question, and I think that's probably for all of us as well. Okay, got it, got it. Okay, no, I think it's a really interesting question because, and it's not only to him, probably it's all of us as well. What do locational advantages do, and how does it shape pedagogy? And I think if we're all able to articulate that a little more conceptually, whether the hermetic position and the non-distraction, does it make it into a bubble, or does it give you a quiet space to engage the world from, you know? And I think the same for us, like the space of distraction, does it distract you, or does it give you the energy and intensity to then see the world as a place to build from and work with the specificities of that? And I think that probably goes for everyone. And that's the advantage of having this fantastically diverse group here.
Yes. That's a question of city. And I think as much as we have this whole thing, the city and the university. So are they, of course the university is always at battles and should be partially with the city, but is also shaped by the city. And I think and shaping the city in the process. And when you have such diverse schools of different geographies and also institutional contexts, which I won't start the panel discussion that is to happen.
Okay, other questions? Yeah, please.
Really nice presentation. It was amazing to see like the diversity and institutions that are there. One of the familiar things that I have experienced in architecture schooling and something that I saw prominent in some of the presentations was this idea of learning by doing. And I just like what kind of happens when we approach it that way, or when we look at architecture schooling that way, is also like sometimes we put students in context and it almost becomes the idea of finding a problem and solving it as well. And what that does is that like it puts, and many times like the studio is addressed in a way that design is the solution to it. And I really like how you address the idea that like housing itself sometimes is not about like producing housing. So like it was a shift in the approach of looking at housing, but still retrofit and repair was a form of intervention which is still design. So I just wanted to know that how like design schools can, or if do try to diversify in the end result also, even in something as simple as studios, where the end result may not be designed because it fundamentally changes what a studio can then be. My name is Fawaz. I am from Mumbai.
If I understand your question right, you're talking about the end result of the studio. in school. So we've had design, some of these projects are studio projects, which end. So you do the designing, and then when you have the summer school, you engage in a build. So it's very much possible to have these kind of end results. And we have sometimes looked at this kind of, not producing the regular diagrams of architecture, but various ways, various alternatives, and it works. It depends really upon the faculty who's mentoring or tutoring that student and his interest. Is that what you're asking? Yeah.
I can add to this. In our institute also we do follow that, especially in our UG, it's not that visible that UG, few of the subjects requires a design solution, especially if it is not thesis. So in thesis we are open, and many of the students, because our criteria for injecting the students were very different, and we tried to not make them what they don't want to be and what their strengths are. So we wanted to strengthen their strengths. So in that way, which is a recent manifestation of splitting the thesis into two. So one will be a design thesis, that's a requirement for UGB architecture. And then another part is they can continue the design if they want to, or they have to ponder upon what are the research questions, and then anything can be the requirement. Even before structuring this syllabus, we allowed students to venture into parametric design and others, so where they just written a code to create parametric design in urban fabric and also created the facade. And then there was valid research question, and they created some form-based development. And our masters is completely like that, so they are completely free to choose whether they will stop at research guideline or even if it is not guideline, what are the protocols and how just answering some questions, or they can create a particular design, or even they can work under in a collaboration with a firm to solve their design problem. So that flexibility we offer, and that works better, especially in our situation where we get very diverse people, and which also says that their understanding of architecture is very different from, and even in one batch, especially in UG, their understanding of architecture, few people can come from their family of architects, and few people has no idea what is architecture, they just got that stream. So we do work with those students.
Maybe a very quick answer to it. I think it's a very good question. And this is again something that we've been discussing over the last 2 days in the pedagogues meet, to also in some ways build a reflective practice. So again, history theory doesn't become another specialization, which is learning to write papers and other things, but a reflective practice within practice itself. And once you do that, because we have long histories of the discipline and where these come from, so if one is able to create a reflective practice, one can take that jump, of really kind of looking at where is it that we are going vis-a-vis the contemporary. So what is contemporary architecture and where have we come from? Where can this shift happen? So I think this is something that we see happening more and more, I think, through the collective.
I'm just thinking aloud with what you said. I mean, some presentations. I'm just thinking about the language of science and the language of measure kind of shaping the way we are thinking. I mean, it may not be explicit. I mean, with IIT, it's a very explicit thing of like the laboratory, but it's also wherein the whole doing thing and the computational thing, and we brought in the whole idea of the dementia, testing an extreme case, or the data heaviness of 90% people. I'm thinking about how do we kind of, because there is a epistemological critique of the language of science, but it appears to be that the emerging pedagogy is being approached with the language of science. I want to kind of push you to kind of think why does it appear to be so? Why? Because first of all, I mean it has immediate hijacking possibility. The industry hijacks it very quickly. Or it has a completely excluding possibility. People with low tech might not be able to participate. It has the dominance of homogenizing everything, that everything is to be spoken through the language of science, and not other multiple languages are not totally case. So I was thinking with you, I mean, thinking along with you, and don't have to answer also. But there is the language of science which is getting consolidated, the idea of measure which is getting consolidated. Even when you say second city, it's a census kind of term, because I mean, you go to this, I mean, even in the metropolitan region over here, there is no second, first, third, there are, our Kerala is full of multiple 7th, 8th, 9th cities, no? So, I mean, it's difficult to identify second city, third city, even through the census, things like that. First city, second city, third city, this kind of stuff. I'm just thinking, there is a consolidation, there appears to be a consolidation, and it's seductive and it's kind of, it is popular and it will gain currency because in the neo-capitalist world it will kind of, gain currency also. But should it be the ideal language for thinking of space? Or shifting it a little bit? And if we were to shift, how do we kind of reshift it, rethink? Well, pedagogically, what would be the intervention beyond the language of science?
I think that is a very difficult question, and I'll just tell that I just said that from 2022 we were trying to rethink about what will be the our take on pedagogy, and we took 2 years to change and in which direction. And we started with these questions, and it's a difficult question, and I don't have exactly the answer. I cannot speak for which will be the way. But we can think from this perspective that in action-wise, where we want our architects to be, is much holistic question. And then there are smaller players, like we are one system. Then there are other institutes who look at the pedagogy from a different perspective. I think if there is a mix of different architects we are producing from country, that is a good mix. So if all the architects has a similar vision, that's a different way of looking at it, and then there are different other perspective what we can do and how we can create a great value in the holistic segment. So definitely as architecture has multiple different facets which has to blend together to look at a same problem, and maybe the perspective of which lenses we're looking at from the issues will be very different from different architects to architect also. So yes, I would say there is no right answer to holistically. If we look at it depends on in which other criteria we face, and how within that system because it's also both way, right? As architect, we can give back to society, so what society needs, and every architect also can give something in a different way, which has a different kind of value addition. So I think in that way, so if we have a tech lenses in one of the institute that works, and which in the segment, but holistically definitely cannot be only tech. There has to be other modes of pedagogy which different school of thought will follow. So there will be, it's important to have different school of thought holistically.
I mean, you could see also in WCFA, in the curriculum, there was this idea of sensing that came up, right? As something that you would want to aspire towards, as a framework of thinking, right? And I think that's an important thing. I don't think we have cracked that, and this is again something that we need to think of as an architectural community, because often the science-based evidence is much easier to quantify and to work with, easier to speak with a larger community. But I think sensing is something that is so important to what architects land up doing to create space. How do we create that? What is that? What is the measure? And how do we really how are we able to speak to a larger community about the measure of sensing and the forms of life that it's able to produce? I think that's a very important thing for us to think of as an architectural community, because otherwise we are losing the game in the kinds of environments we're creating, because we're not able to, in some ways, really speak to a larger community about that. I think that's an important thing for this larger community to really think of.
Can I add one? I just want to say, I want to have a follow-up thing about the technology-driven anxieties, which is more apparent with everyone, all of us. And I mean, yesterday I was discussing that 10 years ago when you were teaching a class and now you're teaching a class, it's a completely different thing, and how do we approach? Because there is such a spiraling of technological shifts. The psyche that you mentioned in your opening remark, technologically driven, anxious psyche. How does pedagogy try to hold it? Because this is a very critical time in the life of the student. How does pedagogy engage with it? That's our question.
This is not quite a question, but some thought that came into my mind while I was listening to all of you for the past 2 days. I think what is really encouraging for me, one as a human and then as a pedagogue, is that from where the whole idea of training an architect to build buildings, and for that to train them to draw, or drawing as a means of, expressing your thought and then continuing that in the field and then building it up, which is in a way what probably Fawaz said about problem solving. So from where architecture pedagogy has been largely problem solving, I think the past 10 to 15 years, we have been able to ask certain critical questions through our studios or through our discussions in many of these schools that are inhabiting this space at the moment. And I think for me that is extremely encouraging, because being a human in a space is much more than what we see in brick and mortar. And some of our students, some of your students are even asking questions about how we co-inhabit a space with other species, which I think was not anywhere discussed at least 10 to 15 years back in our studios. So I think to expand upon what Fawaz was talking, also what Prithvish was hinting at, the idea of a place, can we think beyond just being pedagogues who are just teaching and learning, but as co-thinkers, co-inhabitants of this space, where certain ideas of space is being thought through, and production happens only as a small byproduct of this thinking. And I think that is where the synergies of these schools for me was encouraging, because we're all thinking and we are not just instructing, we are thinking, and we are also learning through this thinking. So it's probably there'll be a day where, like what Fawaz said, we might end up with just an equation as the end product of a studio, or let's say a game as a product of a studio, and not quite a building. So I'm just thinking while I was listening to all of you. So it's not just about the science and the gravity that holds something together, but the very idea of what do we inhabit, how do we inhabit, and why we inhabit. So I think there's a lot of potential here with the synergies that we share to push the boundaries of what we understand as architectural practice, coming back to your point, Rohit. Thank you.
Thanks, Swami. It's 11:20. We can take one or two questions. Prasad?
Thanks. No, I was just wondering, to sort of extend, all of you sort of spoke about your own schools, and a lot of it is sort of shaped by the location, the space of the school itself, its institutional history, school of thought. But I was wondering, if one is to extend beyond one's own school, to draw things from each other. So what is it that you would like to draw from other schools? In all its senses, in terms of the space itself, the kind of the schools of thought, the courses, or sort of the focus. And I'm asking also in terms of thinking across the schools of where do you extend and sort of draw from each other, where do you sort of collaborate. So what are those extensions that you think about when you see other schools sort of working at the same time?
Since we met 6-7 years before, I think it's been a great exposure to place ourselves in comparison to the other. Not to compare in that way, that it might be very small things. Like once Care said that we do all our measurement studies in Tamil Nadu, right? When we initially started WCFA, that was one of the thought that Mysore will be the local sort of source for villages around and things. So when we were rethinking our syllabus, we thought we were doing measure drawings outside Karnataka, now we have come back to Karnataka. So there are smaller points like that. From C, we have learned a lot how to structure and think, and at the rate you have been producing books. Like I didn't understand Prasad's question. I'll be very open about it. So I'm still figuring out what the question is. To put us in places where outside a comfort zone, I think in that thing we are learning a lot. Actually, yeah. Like even from Avni, we look at the studios, we have been now in each other's juries and reviews. I think there are a lot of learnings that were happening very organically between the schools, I think.
To come
I think it's quite evident that each one is coming from certain scales of thought, certain locational advantages, and I think to really kind of think of contemporary architecture, one needs to bring in a lot of learning and knowledge silos. So I think it just goes back to probably the next two panels where it's really kind of, this is something that we've been discussing in the last 2 days. How do we build a pedagogues collective? And how do we draw on, because we've been doing these in informal ways. People have been going to each other's institutions for reviews, for workshops and other things. But how do we, these are very intuitive processes. How do we structure this thinking? How do we make it more meaningful, where it's possible to learn from each other in a more structured way? I think that's something that we're going to very carefully look at in the next couple of years.
So just to kind of, I had a similar question to Prasad's question, and I kind of would put it in a very kind of like one of the slides that you showed you showed us calculations of embodied energy in a building, like materials embodied, right? This is a new kind of exploration of this course that is shaping up, that is asking us to kind of look at questions about or address questions of sustainability. So there are two aspects to it. That there is one, a reliance on reducing the energy that is going into making a building through quantification. Okay. Now, what gets quantified here? What is getting quantified here is the materials and the spaces on the site itself. Okay. What is not getting quantified in this? That's the first part. But Prasad is asking you, what are the other ways beyond quantification to engage with conversations on sustainability? For instance, I conducted an interview with an eminent environmental practitioner, asking her about her current work. She's informing Maharashtra's, energy policy. And I asked her, what is the thrust? Why are you doing this? And the answer is more buildings should become green rated buildings. In Bombay, we have only 500 buildings. This 2 years back, 555. That's not even one neighborhood. Okay? So then one asks her, why such less number of buildings? And as one extends the conversation, one realizes that even the most energy guzzling buildings are not consuming more energy as compared to the national sustainability standards. Forget those of Europe and the US. That's an answer that came from one, this is not mine. So then why and where is this thrust? And slowly one starts asking the next set of questions. One realizes that this energy policy is being pushed forth by a multinational organization who wants to push in new appliances into the market. And architects who are environmentally oriented are falling into that trap. So the politics of that kind of engagement is not opened up. But Prasad's question is beyond this. That are there other ways of sensing which do not rely only on quantification, because this quantification has been hijacked by someone.
This particular, when I was thinking which studio to show, I chose semester 7 because it's where I have both the end of the spectrum, where there is one faculty looking at numbers by engaging in the type of question you're asking, but not talking about quantification, but by talking through quantification. There are two ways you can handle it. Like, I can say that's not important and I don't do that, but I say I do that and I'll show how I can talk about that. So in the same studio, there was another studio where they said, no, we can't put sustainability in these numbers. We will just look at what are the practices in that place and we will just do it. So to balance that, you can also do it this way and you can also do it that way. It's where I think we are in that place. I was thinking, if I take 5th semester public building, the spectrum is much smaller. The lenses are smaller, but when it comes to sustainability, it stretches, right? I can be very numerical or I can be very in terms of space making. So I think, but it's all again back rooted to, because most of practicing architects running the school, and it's very important that is it buildable? Can you convince this idea? I think that question is always there. The pragmaticness of the project is always there, and I think that's also the base and the way we work. And I just want larger question is I personally, there was one meeting I sat and there were 45 people. It was a large meeting and they were all consultants. And the architect was the only one who didn't have a logical answer. Everybody else in the meeting had a logical answer where the drain pipe should go in the auditorium. So I need to aware of all the other 45 people, but I have to give a rational answer, not a logical answer. If we go through the quantification process, I think you can see what can be done with it also. I think that's where,
And this is exactly what I meant by saying, this is exactly what I meant by saying, how do we quantify quantify would be probably a wrong word, but how do we kind of talk about this idea of sensing as a form of the creation of a form of life, life space. Because moment you have to give evidence, you go into the what you call the logical or the scientific, which may produce a different life space. So I think this is something that is a larger question. I don't think architects have answered it. I think we're losing the battle because we are dependent on this evidence-based, method of looking of society. But how do we bring in the idea of sensing and the creation of life spaces and make that a valid form of thinking and operating in the world, right? So I think, it's a larger question for us as a society.
Thanks, Rupali. I think thanks. You also kind of brought this session to a close by asking the question. So I want to summarize this. It's already 11:30 and we'll take somebody else. 15. And we'll take, Anuj has a question, so let's just finish with that.
I mean, if there's time. But I just wanted to point out the fact that one of the aspects we seem to be missing in this discussion is in the framing of the new social, is the dimension of the student. Like, we all seem to be discussing it from what the institutions want to offer. But if we think of it in the model in pedagogy, the model of media theory of transmission and reception, then how do we think of, and if the school is the mediator and the student is the equal stakeholder of knowledge, then I'm wondering that how do we kind of draw attention to drawing knowledge, like how does pedagogy structure or the drawing of knowledge from different forms of engagement. I mean, if we were to think of it as in its sociality of learning, then how do we kind of think of students as learning from primarily engagements, and how is pedagogy structuring these engagements? Because largely the experience of the studio is what the students take away as what they did and experienced in the studio. And so more than, kind of thinking of how we are doing things, what are students really wanting to experience, and through that experience, how are they opening themselves up to absorbing what is being delivered in that space is something I thought that we kind of didn't discuss that enough. So.
Does anybody have a quick response to it, or we kind of take it up in the next session?
New methods is going to take that up. One of the things that we also said is that students become companions. So all the 4 or 5 areas that we located is the milieu that one is located in. And if you think of a life space in which you are located, students are an integral part of that. So how do we shift this from creating a companionship in this milieu? But I think the next panel will be more specific because it will bring in methods of how we engage in this pedagogy and how the students become an integral part of this. So, which is why this is left out as a specific thing in this panel, and I hope we can bring that discussion up in the next.
Thanks everybody. So in this session to close, but hold on to Anuj's question. That is a very important question, because it asked questions about the workshop, the laboratory, and the module as a place from which to think with students. So we'll take a break for half an hour. It's 11:30, 25 minutes, it's 11:35. We'll start the next session at 12. There is team below, down the ground floor. On the ground. Sorry. Thank you so much.